Hey guys, it's Damp. So I have been getting a lot of questions if I would redo my top 10 tips from a long time ago, or just go through some stuff maybe that would help a newer player through the game. And shout out to Major, Sideways Stare, who has been in my Twitch chat as I've been doing some endless runs on Darkest Dungeon lately, and he wrote out like a list of questions that he had that would help me kind of pinpoint where to help y'all. So I'm gonna try and help you guys based off of some stuff I've read on the Reddit that people seem to struggle with, and a few new. This is mostly early game stuff or mid game management stuff that tends to hit you in your first 2 to 3 hours of gameplay. So with that, I'm going to kind of get started, and if you can throw in the comments if you guys have additional questions, I'll try and list some content. Create some more content based off the list that you come up with. So here we go. So one of the most common questions I get is, let's talk through early game stress management and what to do and how to keep that to a minimum. So the easiest way to manage your stress early game, guys, is by bringing a scout. Ideally, you want to bring the bounty hunter. The grave robber, rather. You want to bring the grave robber because of her ability to scout, and what the scouting does for you is it gives you that chance to really dictate where you're going to go. Because in a lot of the dungeons, you don't have to clean 100%. You don't have to hit every room. That's not the objective. The objective should be to get out as quickly as possible and move on. You're just using that to collect some stuff, to scavenge, and then basically get out of there and use those resources to get you towards the end of the game. Some people seem to think like that's the whole point of the game, is to clear out the dungeons and keep pushing through the dungeons. You should be spending the least amount of time possible in a dungeon, and the scouts allow you to do that. On top of what a scout allows you to do that helps manage your stress, especially early game, is they allow you to kind of, I guess the best way to put it is just to surprise your enemy. And by getting those surprises on the enemies, you're going first, and you're again able to eliminate those enemy turns before yours. So again, that minimizes your stress over time significantly, especially in short dungeons where you don't get access to the campfires. So bringing a scout helps immensely. I've talked about this in a few of my other videos, but I can't reiterate it enough. If I am just doing dungeon crawling or working towards the end of a dungeon, I am bringing a scout if I've got one. I mean, it's almost non-negotiable. Just regular dungeon crawling, Vestal and a scout are like the two that are coming whether you like it or not. I mean, those two spots are already occupied for me. So preferably I'm bringing a grave robber, but there's a few other classes that do it pretty well, like the Houndmaster does it pretty good. And then there's a few low-level trinkets that if you see them, I won't have them here, but it's called a survival guide that'll give you additional scout chance. This is kind of an entry-level one just for the purposes of the video, but the survival guide would help. There's some trinkets that help you survive by just providing an extra scout chance. So the grave robber for sure is one of the best ways that you can mitigate the early game stress. The next thing you can do is, as long as you're going to a medium-level dungeon, so let's just go here for a second and I'll kind of show you. I guess I shouldn't say medium level, but medium length dungeon. So every time you go to a medium dungeon, you're going to get one campfire log. If you go to a long dungeon, you're going to get 2 campfire logs. That's pretty obvious, right? On the short dungeons, you're not getting any of them. So they're the least forgiving and the ones I would avoid at all costs when you're early in the game. So as it comes to medium dungeons, which are obviously the preferred, and then start with the ones that are explored 90% of the rooms. Those are probably the most forgiving of any of them. Start with those, and then what I want you to try and do is save that campfire log as long as you can. The only time I would use it is when you have, like, you've got somebody approaching stress of 75%, then you want to use it. But if you can keep it until you actually clear the dungeon and use it at the end, that reduces your stress immensely. And when you're camping early in the game, you should always be focusing stress skills, not necessarily healing. Your healing should be taken care of by bringing your Vestal, like I've already talked about, and making sure that you're bringing that Vestal and managing. When your guys get down to 30 or 40% health, then you want to prioritize their heals. Until they get to that point, you can use the Vestal to stun, or even use Judgment, which is one of the most underrated combat skills in the game. You can use it to do that, to kind of keep your health in check. But realistically, if you're playing the game aggressively, trying to eliminate those enemy turns, and you're not healing till 30 or 40% when these characters get down around there, you should be taken care of as far as your healing goes. Then you can really prioritize the entire camping on reducing your stress, which when you come back to town means you can bring that party again and continue to allow them to level up without them having to rest and without having to spend as much gold on them to reduce that stress. But in the early game, when you're prioritizing or picking camping skills for them, Encourage is one I bring on absolutely everyone. So everybody starts with this just to give me more flexibility if I need it. And then anytime I'm finding skills, for example, I mean, you've got obviously the Jester, but if we were to look at your Houndmaster, the Houndmaster gets self-only minus 20 stress. You've got Therapy Dog, which gives them minus 10 stress here. You can kind of see. You've even got the Leper, which I don't know if I have one on here, but the Leper has some for stress reduction. The Jester has the best stress reduction, so all companions minus 20, one plus 20, all companions minus 15, one companion minus 30, so you can hit him with a combo of Mockery and then turn back time. So for 5 respite points, you're able to hopefully clear the vast majority of the stress that they would have. The other thing that helps manage your stress early in the game is torches. So I have in my strategy guide, which most of you guys have seen, like a spreadsheet that kind of breaks out the amount of torches that you want to bring for each dungeon. When in doubt, bring a little more torches, and as soon as that torchlight gets to 80%, max it out. As soon as it gets to 80%, max it out. And continue to max it out, which will mitigate the amount of stress you just get from walking in the dungeon in darker light. Some people will say, oh, that reduces the gold you get, but what also reduces the gold you get is the amount of gold you're wasting on the stress that's coming to your party. So those are a few things early game that you can do to mitigate your stress. The second most popular question I get is, what people do I take that are coming off the stagecoach? So you've got people coming off the stagecoach and you're like, oh man, who do I pick? There's some times where you don't have a good choice. Like, this is not a great week. And what I would encourage you to do is kind of look, if you don't know the party that well, is just look at their skills and what are the skills focused on. So, for example, if you had to choose here, if you were doing a lot of ruins runs, or you really are getting comfortable with doing the ruins and the enemies there and what they do, you could prioritize the Crusader because they're going to do more damage with Smite versus Unholy. Then you've also, they have a stress reduction skill here, which could help you. Maybe you don't have a Jester that's ready. So that's another one that could be good. If you to look like, hey, we're doing Cove runs. Well, in the Cove, it's normally Blight is really, really strong in the Cove. So you could bring a Plague Doctor in the Cove. It really depends on where you are and what you're attempting to do. So it's kind of a subjective question, but to give you a general rundown of who you'd want to prioritize, Vestal's always number one if you don't have enough Vestals, and you can hardly have enough Vestals early on because you're going to be cycling through them. Another one that tends to do very well would be the Jester and maybe a Houndmaster and the Grave Robber, because you want to consider not only stress reduction but scouting. So you've got the Vestal and Grave Robber are normally two really good choices, and then you've got the Jester for stress reduction. You've got the Houndmaster for stress reduction and scouting, so they kind of fill a hybrid void there. And then you want to prioritize people who can hit the back line. That tends to be very important, and a big place where people take a lot of stress damage or a lot of damage in general is because they aren't prioritizing the back line, which we'll come to a little later. So the next question that kind of ties into all that is, okay, you've got your heroes. When do you keep them and when do you dump them? So the best way I can tell you to know when you're going to get rid of a hero is, and why I say this is, so many people get these characters and they rename them. They name them after their subscribers in their Twitch chat or their friends or whatever, and they're like, all right, this is Franklin. Okay, so Franklin here, we're going to keep Franklin forever because he's one of my friends and I'm going to keep him. And Franklin gets super stressed out and you're like, oh my god, I got to spend all this gold. He's got diseases. Typically the best thing to do is just dismiss him. So you click on the character and you click dismiss, it sends them away, and that slot opens up to bring somebody new fresh off the stagecoach. This game is designed to be more an employee management game than it is designed to be somebody you're going to keep forever and grow them and progress. Eventually they'll progress, but early on, you've got to manage those employees and hire and fire them and get them out if they aren't pulling their weight. So how do you know when you really want to keep somebody? The best way is to go in and look at their perks and see if their perks suit their position. So let's just look at this Crusader. So plus 10% damage if torch above 75. That's pretty good for a Crusader. And then plus 10% stress heal received is also not bad. But then you also have to look at their negative quirks. So if you look at the negative quirks, Kleptomaniac. Klepto is actually one of the worst ones in the game because it triggers a lot of the curios as you're going through the dungeon. So that's not a great one. So you'd want to kind of dismiss that if you decide you want to keep this guy. But there are some that I list in the strategy guide that actually walk you through, hey, this is what you absolutely want to keep. And you'll begin to learn those over time. Like, for example, with characters that have high dodge, if you're getting dodge quirks, then you want to keep those. Like, you want to be able to min-max these characters, and that's how I would identify which characters you want to keep or not. If their character is high dodge, like a Jester, for example, and they're getting more dodge, that's great. You know, if they are primarily a melee damage character and they're getting melee quirks, you want to keep them. If they're a let's say they're somebody who struggles, like the Leper struggles with accuracy, and they're getting accuracy perks to offset their worst perk, those are great. You want to keep those. That's typically a really good role for that particular character. So that's how you determine if you keep them. Otherwise, the only reason you keep somebody is if it's a Vestal or if it's, Grave Robber like we've already talked about. Those are people you want to keep just because they're going to mitigate the stress and the amount of gold you're going to spend to keep your party moving. So hopefully those correlate to what y'all were asking for. As far as the next stuff, another thing I see people do is, so you have all these heirlooms right early on in the game, and people don't know what to keep. They're trying to keep everything. Their inventory's maxed out to the gills. They're super, super heavy because they're bringing all this stuff. They want to carry all the gold, and then they want to carry all the heirlooms too, but you got to prioritize early in the game. So what you want to do is kind of look at the Stagecoach, for example, and you go, all right, I know that I need to upgrade the Stagecoach. The Stagecoach is one of the most important things to upgrade first. You can see that even though we're early in the game, this is what I've focused on. So you need to keep these deeds, right? So deeds are what you're going to keep. So because of the deeds, and you want to prioritize them, let's make that the only heirloom you're going to take as you go through. Now, yes, obviously you can recycle some of them and change them into other currency, but the translation, or the exchange rate you're getting, rather, is not great. So prioritize heirlooms, or these heirlooms, the deeds, for example, and then I'd say your second priority would be your gold, and then your third one you can determine between either trinkets or a secondary heirloom that you may need. For example, like here, you can see the crests. That's another one we're going to need. So pick 2 heirlooms, don't pick 5, don't pick 4, don't pick 3 even. Pick 2 and your gold and try and prioritize that. And always remember that at a certain point, you're going to begin to dump some of these things that you're provisioning early on for those items also. I mean, the gold should replace your bandages eventually, should be able to heal through those. Your heirloom should be able to go over, instead of keeping your like your medicinal herbs, you're going to instead keep the gold or the heirlooms. I mean, you want to dump those things when it comes to it. So prioritize that over everything. So your top priority is going to be your deeds. Your second priority is going to be quests or maybe gold, depending on the situation that you're currently in. So focus on one thing. Focus on upgrading one thing. Don't upgrade all over the place. Do your Stagecoach first. Then probably what you want to look at is your blacksmith. After you upgrade your blacksmith, maybe go to the guild, and then maybe the sanitarium, then the abbey. It just depends on the situation you guys are in. It's very dynamic, but generally speaking, you're going to upgrade your Stagecoach first. So another question I get is, where should I go first? I'm brand new in the game. What dungeon should I prioritize? Where should I start? In my opinion, the easiest one to start is in the ruins. And if you are selecting characters early on and you know you're going to do the ruins, you're going to focus on people that use blight skills, which allows you to then go to the cove because they're going to be strong in the cove too. So the ruins and then the cove would be the top two options I would give you to begin with. They're kind of the most linear, I would say, as far as learning the game and easing into the game to begin with. But definitely the ruins is where I would start. The Warrens in the Well tend to be the most punishing because on top of throwing stress and damage in there, a lot of them are going to have diseases, and there's a lot of creatures in these zones that can deal really high crit damage, which can often one-shot your character and bring them to death's door. Alright, so moving on, the next question I get is, so I've started to save up some of my gold, what do I do with it? So you're going to save your gold for the people that are worth it. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you're going to find people with really good quirks, and that's who you're going to invest in. You're going to start to not only lock in some of their quirks that are really good, but you're going to reduce some of the quirks that are really bad on them. I would focus more on the good quirks because they're harder to get than saying, you know, this person has kleptomania, I'm going to just dismiss them. Well, if they have really good positive quirks, keep them, because eventually you're going to be able to afford to replace that person. And then the last thing I'll kind of touch on, because we're already kind of at a longer video here, is working in team composition. So often I get a question, you know, how do I build a team? Who works well together? Oh, and there are so many combos and things you can go over, guys, that you'll learn as you go through the videos. But the main thing I want to get across to you would be, as you're prioritizing, always bring a Vestal. Try and bring somebody that scouts. And then you want to make sure you have somebody who can hit the third and fourth row, because if you leave that row unchecked, they're going to stress and or damage. Those are typically the highest stress characters in lines 3 and 4, and they're the highest damage characters that sit in lines 3 and 4. So if you leave them unchecked by having to work your way from, you know, the first two lines back into the 3 and 4 line, and then you've got to hack through their corpses in order to get back to them, it's going to be even more difficult on you. So make sure you pick somebody that can hit the third and fourth line. And then the last thing I'd add is somebody who can manage stress will definitely reduce the amount of gold that you're spending. So if you can get a Houndmaster and make that work, or you have a Jester, anybody who can heal stress at the campfire, that helps immensely. But initially, I think when I first started playing the game, I was like, all right, let me find a tank. We're going to need a tank. Not true. You don't need a tank. Put a bounty hunter up there. You know, oh, okay, then I definitely need to put somebody in the second row that is high DPS. Not necessarily true either. Sometimes you're using somebody who scouts in the second row, or you're using your stress healer in the second row. A lot of the characters are pretty flexible as long as you're able to learn kind of what they do over time. So I would tell you, focus on somebody that can hit the back line, have a scout, make sure you're bringing a Vestal if you can. If you can't, bring, you know, your secondary healer is probably going to be the Occultist, which isn't great early in the game. He's kind of a risk, but sometimes you don't have that choice early on. And then really work on trying to camp as late as you can, which will bring down your stress and give you more gold. So that takes care of that. Hopefully that answers a lot of your questions, y'all. Again, sorry for my absence and how long I've been gone. My work is just finally starting to slow up this year, so I know it's been forever. Thanks for your patience. We're almost at 10K subs, so I really appreciate all the support, everybody. And hopefully this helps you guys become better players. Just throw in the comments what other questions you have, and I'll try and use that to make our next DD video, because with the Steam sale, I've had a lot more interest in DD lately. So I'll see y'all later. Be good.